It's been 10 years since I last went on an interview, but here I am now, 44 years old, and I've decided to continue doing what I love to do. My name is Alex Price, and I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm new to the area, and truth be told, this company used to be one of my main competitors. I have a feeling they will offer me a job when they see what I have to offer them. Soon, hopefully, things will fall into place. My plan, that is, my plan to get rid of my cheating wife. I met Holly in 1993, and even now I can picture her in that time. She was beautiful and so confident. I, on the other hand, was shy and introverted. I guess being raised by a bossy bitch mother has that effect on a person. She was also aided by her ugly sisters. Their names were Megan and Anna, and they bullied me my entire childhood. Megan was the oldest and 13 years older than me. Anna was 10 years older. Apparently, I was a mistake and was not planned, and they all blame my birth on my parents' breakup. My father left home in 1977 when I was 5 years old and never came back. It wasn't until recently that I learned the truth. "Come in, Mr. Price. Nice to meet you." I was immediately drawn in by the cordiality of Robert Williams, owner of Sutton Hydraulics. He was the complete opposite of the bastard I was walking away from. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Williams," I replied cordially. I took a seat in his imposing office and he sat down across from me and spoke. "I'm surprised to hear that you're leaving Walker Engineering, Mr. Price." "Please call me Alex, and I can't wait to get out of there," I replied. "They do a great job there, Mr. Price. Alex, I'm sorry." He was still looking at me with a look of confusion on his face. "I'm doing a great job, Mr. Williams." "Please call me Robert," he interjected. As I said, I've worked hard over the last 10 years, and it's been my developments that have moved the company forward, all without much thanks and lately without any respect. He looked at me seriously for a few seconds. I didn't say anything about my situation and wanted to keep it private for now. "I have no doubt in my mind that I want you here, Alex. I can offer you the package you asked for, which means a pay rise of a few £1,000s. But you also said on the phone that if you helped us win a few more contracts, you'd like a commission. Is that correct?" He furrowed his eyebrows. "Yes?" "I hope it's not something illegal, Alex. I'm not going to interfere," he said. I raised my hand to assure him of my honest intentions. I interact with our clients a lot. I interact with them on a daily basis. I know what they pay for our products, and I know the contracts practically inside out. I began to explain to an attentive Robert Williams. "How would anyone know that we offer more favorable terms? And with my designs and your team, we can be the best in the game. What do you say?" I offered confidently. He held out his hand and I shook it. Looking into his eyes, I was convinced that I had an honest man in front of me. Another part of the plan was accomplished. Now back to my cheating wife, Holly. We met at Kingston University in South London. She was in her final year of a creative writing degree, and I was completing my master's in mechanical engineering and design. As I said, I was too shy to approach her, and she had never lacked attention from men. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall, had brown hair and big brown eyes. She was the kind of woman you could get lost in. She had a beautiful body, but I knew she was taller than me. All the guys who ran after her were outgoing and popular. To my surprise, one of her friends started talking to me at a party, and Holly came over and joined us. I had little experience with women, and I think my modesty and shyness made me attractive to her. I worked up the courage to ask her out, and we started dating. After about 6 months of dating, I heard rumors that she was having sex with other guys, but I had no way to prove it, and I was afraid to confront her. Holly was a spoiled child. Her parents spoiled her and her sister Caroline, and for most of our relationship I had to put up with her acting like a princess. If she wasn't doing well, she would make a fuss and wasn't shy about causing trouble in public, which confused me. My friends couldn't stand her and thought I should get rid of her, but I fell in love and had never experienced anything like it before. When we graduated, we both got jobs and were able to rent an apartment near Southampton, in Hampshire. Her family was from there, and I had long since stopped finding anything in common with mine. We married a year later and Sophie was born the following year, followed by Ava a couple more years later. Holly really enjoyed being a mom, and we've been doing great ever since. I have been promoted several times, and 10 years ago, I started working for Walker Engineering. Pay raises and bonuses helped us save up for a better house, but like most people in the world, 2008 was a bad year. Because of the economic downturn, Many people lost their jobs. It became harder to get contracts, so we all had to step up our work and work longer hours without getting extra money. It was during this time, when both girls were in high school, that I realized Holly was having an affair with some guy from our old university. I was so focused on work that by the time it was over, I never realized who it was, and my best friend Toby thought it was a guy from her class who had moved nearby. I brought it up to her one day, and she just laughed in my face and told me to stop being stupid. But I knew she was lying. Because I was able to keep my job and a good salary, I was able to buy a nice house. Holly always demanded that I buy a house that matched our status, whatever that meant. But I relented, as always, and we managed to buy a nice detached house with 5 beds in Southampton. It was a buyer's market at the time, so we got a good price, although the mortgage was a bit high. The only thing I did out of order was to open a new savings account in my name only. I only put my year-end bonus into it, and since I was the sole breadwinner and in charge of all the finances and banking, I don't think Holly would have known about it even if I had waved the receipts in her face. In hindsight, I can say it was one of the best things I could have done. I needed protection because I wasn't sure if Holly was planning on leaving me if the old lover ever came back. Things went back to normal after that, and the girls were always my top priority. I encouraged them in their studies and tried to spend a lot of time with them on weekends. In fact, I was the one who took them to dance classes, concerts, and the zoo more times than I can remember. Holly always seemed too busy on coffee dates with her other spoiled and lazy girlfriends. I rarely socialized with other husbands, but we all seemed to be nephews and subordinates to one degree or another. My friends hummed the Rolling Stones song Under My Thumb to me when I had to cancel plans in favor of something Holly wanted to do. Even at work, the guys on the shop floor made comments about my marital status, and especially Holly's control over me. It was only a few months ago that everything came to a head. Ava had just left for university, and for the first time in 18 years, Holly and I were alone. Both girls went to our old alma mater, and as I was finishing unpacking Ava's things in the apartment she would be sharing with her sister, she turned to me and asked why I was even with their mother. I was stunned, for she had always been such a quiet girl like her old father. "Daddy, I heard she's hanging out with Henry Walker from your company," Ava said. I still remember the tears in her eyes as she spoke. It was news to me, but I wasn't surprised. All these years I could have investigated her adventures, but I never did for fear of destroying the family and making my girls suffer for it and resent me like my sisters resented their father. I let her cuckold me because the alternative did not bear thinking about. I still loved her, but even more I loved what we had created. This news made several impressions on me. First, I realized for the first time that my girls' level of hostility toward their mother was much higher than I had realized. They loved and respected me, but I knew they were disappointed that I hadn't taken a tougher stance toward Holly. Secondly, it made me remember the old feelings I had for the women in my life growing up and how that contributed to my weaknesses. And finally, I realized that at work the employees were openly talking and laughing at me, and most of all at Henry Walker, who turned out to be the nephew of Jack, the owner of the company and the man with whom I had a cuckolded relationship. And I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't take it anymore, especially now that my youngest daughter had found out about Holly's abuse of me. I knew I had to confront her. My heart raced as I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Holly to come home. When she finally showed up, I found that I couldn't speak anymore. She just stared at me with what you could call apathy and contempt. She said nothing to me as she put her things away in the closets. Finally, I spoke up. "Are you having an affair with Holly?" She turned to face me, blushing slightly, but answered without hesitation. "I wouldn't call it an affair, honey." I was shocked by her admission and waited silently for her to explain why sex with another man didn't count as an affair. "So, you're a wonderful man, Alex. You're a great provider and my best friend. But there are things you can't provide for me, and I'm not ashamed to say I want all those things," she said bluntly and openly. "So you're cheating on me," I said, discouraged by her brazen approach to infidelity. "Only my body," she said, "but not my heart and mind, Alex, which belong to you." I felt dizzy and knots in my stomach. The audacity of her words made me speechless. "I've never turned you down for sex, Alex, and all I'm doing is exploring with a couple of young guys," she admitted. "What?" I exclaimed. I hadn't raised my voice once, and my response caught her off guard. She walked around the table and sat down across from me. Don't yell at me, Alex, she said, regaining her composure. You admitted to cheating on me with two guys and I'm supposed to keep quiet, I replied. I love you, Alex, but that's the way it's going to be. Deal with it or I'm still going to leave and be with them, she said, simultaneously threatening and giving me an ultimatum. I just sat there staring at her as her face softened. For a minute, I thought she saw the hurt on my face. Everyone does that these days, Alex. My girlfriends have had affairs with younger men, and they say it makes for a better marriage, she said. I was shocked. I had a hard time accepting all of this before, and now Holly was actually trying to justify her cheating by telling me that all of her friends were cheating too. As for her opinion that it would make our marriage better, it was dismissive at best. She didn't care about the marriage or me, only the comfort and security I could provide. I spoke up again, snap. So I can have another woman. Is that what you're saying, Holly? No. She looked at me for a few seconds and then laughed in my face. I sat in silence as she continued to laugh and tried to pull myself together. Yeah, Alex, come on, be serious. You have trouble talking to women you've known for years. What chance do you have of talking to anyone else? She was blatantly mocking me as she continued to giggle, and I felt awkward and embarrassed, but she didn't give up. That's the way it's going to be, Alex, so don't ruin a good thing. I'm still your wife, I still love you, and I still come home to you every night. Don't ruin your life, don't complain about it, and don't do something you'll regret later. She left me at the table, reflecting on what had just happened to my life, to my world. She was so frank about her business that I realized she didn't care about me one bit. I didn't care that all her friends were whores, but that didn't give her the right to be one. Not only that, but she had the nerve to threaten me. I was angry, very angry. I slept in the spare room that night. I couldn't be near her, but around midnight, Holly woke me up and asked me why I wasn't going to bed. Was she really that deluded? I knew she was a spoiled bitch, but really? Come on, Alex, get over it. That's the way the world works now. You're just acting like an old man, she said. I didn't say anything back. I sensed her presence on the landing by peeking into the spare room. Suit yourself, Alex. You'll be back in bed soon. I know you will. You don't deny me anything, and you know as well as I do that I'll get my way, she stated confidently. In reality, she was right. What had I done in a 22-year relationship that could indicate my unbridled devotion and willingness to go along with whatever she said and wanted? It was common knowledge that I was on her payroll, and now it was common knowledge among her friends and my coworkers that I was also a cuckold. I didn't sleep a wink, so I decided to go downstairs and watch TV. There was a program on about celebrities who traced their lineage, and while much of it flew past me, it made me think about my own family. I had no contact with my mother or sisters, but I began to remember my father. I remembered so little about him. Did he have a family? I think he did. Why did he leave, and was it as my mother said that he left us? Before I left for university, I found out from my brother-in-law that my father had died years ago, but my sisters denied knowing. Then I decided to cut them out of my life. The next day, I got up and left the house before Holly even showed up in our room. Thoughts of what she had told me were still swarming in my head, and I was desperately trying to focus on something more positive to get through the day. I remembered the TV program I had watched the night before and decided to make some inquiries about the father. The girls didn't need me as much anymore, and my wife was having sex with God knows who, so maybe answering questions about who and what my father was would keep me occupied. Good morning, Alex. I turned to see who was talking and bumped into Henry Walker. The smug look on his face, like he was ready to burst into laughter at any moment, made my blood boil. I just stared at him and said nothing. How's your wife doing? He asked, blatantly mocking me. I heard a few giggles from the grown men at the coffee machine. I just stared at them as they stood their ground. I walked past them as they continued to giggle at my expense. I felt like the whole world knew my business, and even my boss's secretary Olivia seemed to find my situation laughable and open to ridicule. Can I get you anything, Mr. Price? Maybe a couple marbles? I looked up at her. What did you just say? I asked, looking her straight in the eye. She stepped from foot to foot and walked over to me. I told you there would be no calls, she said, trying to suppress a laugh. I walked into my office and sat down at my desk. My day had started in the most unfortunate way, and now I was the laughingstock both at work and at home. I tried my best to focus on my project, but the anger inside of me would not subside. I decided to start looking for my father. All I knew was that he was born in Cambridgeshire and left us at the age of 38 in 1977, so I started searching for family history websites in the area. After a 30-minute search, I found that there were 14 people named James Price living in Cambridgeshire, born in 1939. I knew that he might have died a few years before I went to university, so I managed to narrow the list down to 3 possible people. Deciding I didn't have time to search for each of them, I posted a message on genealogy websites in each of the towns I found. As I sat in my office reflecting on the past 24 hours, I received a call from my boss, Jack. He wanted to talk to me in his office. Jack was a successful and wealthy man, but in his 60s he had been married 3 times. He was a cheater and a bully. He was one of those power-crazed types who demand respect but give nothing in return. Many times in the past I had considered leaving, but he always convinced me to stay, and yes, the money was the best around. The only thing I knew about him was that he was having sex with his secretary Olivia behind his third wife's back. It's come to my attention that your wife is playing a joke on you, Alex, he said sharply. With your nephew, I snapped back. Well, yeah, he's a hot-tempered guy. It runs in their family, he said, laughing when I stopped talking. But that's what I want to talk to you about. I don't want this to affect the business, and family comes first for me, Alex. So, if you get in trouble, you'll be the one who has to leave the company. Is that understood? He was talking to me like an old school teacher disciplining a child. I bit my lip, watching his impatient secretary Olivia, who was hanging around near the door. She was no doubt gathering information to pass on to her friends at the factory. Turning to leave, I wondered why a young woman like her would stoop to having sex with a dirty old man like Jack Walker. As I walked past her, I heard the giggling again. I lowered my head and walked out. As the door closed behind me, I heard explosive laughter that was clearly addressed to me. Back in my office, I realized that being here had done me no good. I had paid for my girl's education, and now I was only funding my wife's infidelity. I was a fairly simple man. I liked my gadgets, but I could do without a big house. Most of my living expenses were Holly's indulgences. Weekly visits to the hairdresser and manicurist, her car, phone, and other unnecessary luxuries. At work, I was usually happy. It was my place to be creative, and I was very successful. I was the one who designed many of the parts that were manufactured and sold here, and I was sure I could get a job elsewhere. They just thought I was too weak, and they were right. I was not confrontational and never made a fuss because I was content. I was good old Alex, a humble engineer that people could get around. I looked at the screensaver with a picture of the family on vacation, clicked my mouse, and an email page opened. Waiting for me was a message from a woman named Jennifer Holmes of the Cambridge Genealogical Committee. I was stunned at how quickly they responded, clicked on the button, and read the message. I was stunned. Jennifer read my message asking for information about my father and contacted a woman who claimed to be his niece and had been on this same site many months ago researching her family tree. Her name was Rachel Murray, and she was my cousin. I sent Jennifer my number and asked if Rachel could contact me. I left work in high spirits. As soon as I entered the house, I could smell dinner cooking. Leaving my bag in the hallway, I walked into the kitchen and found Holly busy cooking. We mumbled a greeting but ate in silence. During dinner, Holly kept trying to look me in the eye, but I guess she realized I was still angry. Until tonight, I couldn't live a few hours without embarrassing her or letting her drive me to the edge. She broke the ice. "Can we talk about last night, Alex?" she asked meekly. "We have nothing to talk about. You explained perfectly well what happened last night, and I'll either accept it or I won't, right?" For a few seconds, she looked at me with a look of regret on her face. But it didn't last long. She took a deep breath, cleared her throat, and continued. "You're a great husband, and you've never denied me anything, so please don't deny me, Alex." She was almost begging, as she always did, to get what she wanted. "If I'm so wonderful, why cheat on me? Why make a fool of me?" I asked honestly. She wrinkled her nose and just brushed me off. She didn't have an answer. She was just being selfish, and I was getting more and more tired of it. There was nothing more I could do to make her happy. How many hours do I work to pay the bills and give her everything she wants, and all I get in return is disrespect and ridicule? I drive a 12-year-old Range Rover, and she drives a car that's less than 2 years old. Look, Alex, I have needs, and you just can't fulfill them. So you're either going to handle it like I know you can, or you're going to cede me to a younger man. You mean Henry Walker? You can use his name Holly. Everyone knows he's had sex with you, I interjected. Yes, Henry and I are lovers. He's practically your boss, Alex, and one day he'll take over the company from his uncle, she said bluntly. So right now, he's giving me what I need in bed. And if you don't get over it and agree, I'll leave you and he'll give me everything else I want and need. I, as usual, didn't say anything back. I just got up from my seat and walked into the office. I really wanted to punch someone or something, but instead I slumped down in my chair and screamed into my hands. Tears came to my eyes, and I wanted to be anywhere but here and now. I found a tissue and wiped my eyes when the phone rang. I picked it up and heard an unfamiliar voice on the other end. It was Rachel. We talked for about an hour, and when I hung up, everything else slipped my mind and a huge smile appeared on my face. Rachel was thrilled that I had decided to take on my dad, and she had a lot to tell me. She was talking at 100 miles an hour, and I was having a hard time taking in everything she was saying. I learned that my mom actually kicked my dad out of the house and lied to me all throughout my childhood. Sadly, he died in 1983 when I was only 11 years old. He died of alcohol poisoning, and his mother, my grandmother, always blamed my mom for his temper and mental state after he left us. Rachel told me that he really wanted to come back into my life but was prevented from doing so. We arranged to meet this weekend at her house in Cambridge. I was excited and knew the break would be good for me. The rest of the week dragged on. Things were the same at home, but at work I was constantly being laughed at behind my back. Henry and his buddies thought it would be funny to hang a pair of panties on my office door. I looked at Olivia, but she didn't say anything. Inside the panties was a note. Please return to your wife. I was broken. I sat at my desk that day too and cried. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. I was glad when Saturday came. I told Holly I was going to see a friend in London and she didn't care what I was doing. I guess she would mock me, so her absence made it easier. The drive to Cambridge was stressful. The M25 highway proved to be a nightmare as usual, and I ended up getting to Rachel's house an hour later than I had hoped. This didn't seem to faze her as I was greeted with the best hug I've had in years. I was introduced to her husband, Greg, and two young children, Grace and William. When the formalities were over, we moved on to talking about my dad and my new family. Rachel had such a warm, unselfish personality that she and Greg were constantly interrupting each other and finishing each other's sentences. I think they both couldn't wait to share our family's story. During my time there, David and Lucy Price joined us. He was my cousin and Rachel's brother. We got along very well, and he added everything he knew about my father and family. After lunch, we went on a little trip where I had some time to think. When we got back, David and I talked about work and family life. He could tell things weren't going well, and for some reason, I confided in both of my new cousins. They just told me not to put up with it and that they would support me if I needed anything. I was so grateful to them. I left Cambridge with a new perspective on things. I had been lied to so much and treated so badly throughout my life that realizing that I had a completely different family who had shown me more kindness and honesty in one day than most people I had known my whole life gave me hope. I needed to sort my life out and get back to being happy. Not just for myself, but for my girls, my friends, and my new family. By the time I got home, it was 8 o'clock in the evening and Holly was just about to go out. Where are you going, Holly? I asked. Out with my friends. You mean Henry or Max? I snapped back. She looked at me, somewhat taken aback that I knew the name of her other lover. I threw her an understanding look. Please don't do this again, Alex, she begged, seemingly indifferent to my feelings. Please, Holly, I'm asking you to stop this and become my wife. Stop being silly, Alex. I am your wife and always will be. Don't deny me my pleasures and I'll make your life easier. I'll be back by midnight. She completely ignored my wishes and continued to threaten me. She approached me with her arms outstretched and I turned my back to her. She said nothing in response to my blatant insult, just picked up her Prada purse and headed for the door. Holly, as your husband, I'm asking you not to do this. My voice became harsher. She stopped and looked at me as if asking herself who this guy was and what he thought about talking to me like that. It only lasted a second before she burst out laughing. What are you going to do, Alex? Leave me? You'll never have the guts to do that. We both know you'll always be there for me. I lowered my head as her words echoed in my head. No balls for me. deny me my pleasures. I always knew she was a spoiled brat. Her parents made sure of that. I knew I treated her like a queen while I was a workhorse myself. I knew she was selfish, but I always believed she loved me more than anything. I knew I'd been a fool, and I knew I'd been one for too long. It had to end, and I needed to make plans to make it happen. Without wasting any time, I got down to business. I actually started with the times Henry or Max had sex with her. Perhaps they were doing it together. Perhaps that's what she meant when she said she liked getting brownies and eating them. I provide her with security, protection, and material goods while two young assholes have sex with her at will. These thoughts were driving me crazy and I was starting to lose my concentration. I needed to find a way to destroy the last vestiges of my attachment to her, and I think I found it. I found the box I was looking for and the particular photograph in it. It was the only picture of my mom and sisters. I didn't think it would work, but I cut Holly's face out of the picture and glued it next to them. I had no love left for them, and adding Holly's smirking face to the picture might help. I put it on the desk next to the monitor in my office. At about 12:45, I was finishing up work. I had pretty much decided what I was going to be doing in the near future. I was already visualizing when I would be leaving, but it could be in a few weeks. I had time because Holly didn't expect me to leave. It might not work out and I would definitely need help to pull it all off. But by now, I had convinced myself that I would go all the way. I heard someone stumbling out the door and as I got up to look out the window, I saw Henry Walker's car pulling away. I heard her coming up the stairs and quickly erased my story. I would have to use incognito mode in the future. I waited for her to enter our bedroom and walked down the stairs to make myself some coffee. I sat on the couch and thought about my future away from this place, and honestly, without my daughter's presence, I knew it wouldn't be so bad. I decided to try and move closer to them. Monday morning, I went to work, clearly realizing I wouldn't lift a finger. Jack Walker could fire me for all I cared. I walked to my office, ignoring the taunts and comments directed at me. I would destroy those bastards, and I knew my anger would get me through this. I managed to get an appointment at the bank for 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I spent the time preparing for it, analyzing my finances. The odds were slim, but if everything worked out and the right people helped me, I would come out of this situation unscathed. The meeting went according to plan, and I was able to close my savings account and remove my name from our joint account. I still had an ISA with a few thousand left in the account, so I closed it for cash and put it in my wallet. On the way to the office, I stopped by the PC World store and bought 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 GB USB 3.0 hard drive, and a new hard drive for my computer. Back in the office, I sat down at my desk and began to see if I could open the company's personal client files. I had seen a glimpse of them in Jack's office, so I knew they existed, but I needed his password. It didn't take me more than an hour to crack it. Ironically, his wife's name was his username, and his password was his name and 6-digit birthday number, Jack240656. I had everything I needed. I plugged the disk into my computer and loaded all the files onto it. 10 minutes later, I did the same with all my new plans and drawings for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system I was working on to keep this company ahead of the curve. We were building pumps for air conditioners, heavy equipment, and even diaries. I erased all my computer history, including all my plans and all my projects. Then, I turned it off, removed the hard drive and replaced it with a new one. I put everything in my bag and reinstalled Windows. I spent the rest of the day researching our competitors using my phone. I logged onto the Monster website to look for engineering jobs in the South London and Surrey area and then left for the day. In the evening, after another silent dinner, I went to my office. I discovered that one of our major competitors, going through a financial downturn, was looking for a mechanical engineer to design and manage a store. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was pretty close. They were offering a salary pound 10K less than my current salary, so I sent an email and attached my CV. That night, I decided to sleep in our matrimonial bed so as not to disturb Holly. However, I made sure I was already asleep when she walked in. I felt her rubbing against me, and I felt disgusted. But as disgusted as I was, it felt good to react that way. I became disgusted with her, and that would help me in the long run. The next day, I received a phone call from a very surprised Robert Williams of Sutton Hydraulics. We spoke briefly, and he couldn't believe that I could leave Walker Engineering for his small company. He offered me the job almost immediately, but I insisted on an interview the next day. He accepted. Another important cog was put in place, and the wheels started turning very quickly. I had a lot of free time on my hands and started looking for apartments in the area. I didn't need a house, and although there weren't many options, I managed to find one very nice apartment. It was £1,200 a month with 2 bedrooms and was perfect for me. The apartment was 15 minutes from the girls and 5 minutes from work. I arranged a viewing the day after my interview with Robert Williams. I then spoke to Jack and told him I needed to meet my daughters in Kingston the next day to sign some papers, but he just brushed me off and said, "Go." That same night, I called my best friend Toby Brown. We'd known each other since 6th grade. We both went to Kingston, but he had studied finance and math. He was now a big banking analyst in the city and lived with his wife and children in a nice house in Twickenham. Most of all, he and his wife hated Holly, so we rarely spoke to each other as a couple. Holly was jealous of Sarah because she was an ambitious web developer and married to a rich banker. I guess even with all I was giving her, I still wasn't up to her level. I arranged to meet Toby the next night after the interview and apartment viewing. He knew I had something on my mind, but I told him I'd tell him everything when we met. On the way out, I thought about a lot of things. Today was important not only for my plans for the near future, but also for my future. At this point, I had no idea how the girls would react. Before the recent revelations, I had planned to retire at 55. I was thinking of investing in a villa in Italy or somewhere else. My mortgage would be paid off when I turned 50, and the extra 5 years of work would allow us to accumulate a nice little fund without relying on a retirement wallet. My new job was about a 20-minute drive from the girls' apartment. The meeting went quickly, the apartment was perfect, so I had plenty of time before meeting Toby, so I grabbed lunch for me and the girls and headed to their apartment. They lived together, and I was paying half the rent. As I approached the house, I didn't know what I would say to them. I didn't know how often they talked to their mom, but I knew I didn't want to hide anything from them. When they saw me, they ran up and grabbed me as I was already walking through the door. My smile was visible from space. I missed them both so much. "Daddy, Daddy," they shouted, laughing like they were still toddlers. They led me into the house and I laid out the lunch I had grabbed on the way. We sat and ate while they told me about their lives and schoolwork. I was so proud of my 2 girls. Sophie had already studied pharmacology for 2 years, and Ava was studying to be a nurse. 2 professions for loving and caring people. I saw them as Rachel and I talked at length about our new family, promising that we would all meet soon. When we finished lunch, I took a sip of coffee and wondered, did they know something was going on? "What is it, Daddy? Spill it," Sophie said. "Well, you know your mom cheated on me, right?" I said. They both looked at each other, then returned their gaze to me and nodded in unison. "Well, I've had enough, and I've decided I'm going to leave her," I muttered to everyone's smiles. "Good," Ava said. "About time, Daddy," Sophie added. "You girls aren't getting mad and doing nothing, are you?" I asked timidly. "No, Daddy, for as long as I can remember, she's been a bitch to you," Sophie growled. I considered telling her off for disrespecting her mother, but I didn't. In fact, I thought, good for Sophie. I also felt embarrassed again because they had obviously seen this as children. I hoped they wouldn't follow in their mother's footsteps as far as men were concerned. I hoped I hadn't hurt them in any way because I was too weak and pathetic. I also hoped I respected them. "What are you going to do, Dad?" Ava asked. I told them I had a new job and that I would be moving closer to them. They were thrilled, but also surprised that I had actually decided to move away from their cheating mother and was already making plans to do so. For that, I received 2 strong and loving hugs. I told them I would do everything I could to protect my financial future without going into details. When I got up to leave, they said they would support me no matter what. And although they love their mother, she comes second to me and always has. I left their apartment full of happiness and was now ready for the next phase of my plan. This was the most important part. Toby and Sarah met a few years after he left university. They are 2 of the nicest people I know, and today, I was counting on their favor. They greeted me warmly as usual, but my mind was spinning with thoughts of what I would ask of them, and they both realized I was out of place. They immediately inquired about what was going on, and I told them. There was no point in beating around the bush. I told them everything that had happened and the first part of my plans. They were more surprised by my resistance than by Holly's infidelity. In their eyes, it was quite commonplace. So why did you dump her now, Alex? Sarah asked, holding out another cup of tea to me. I declined something stronger since I had to drive home today. So I always thought she was cheating on me, but I couldn't prove it. Now she's admitted it, and everything's falling into place. I also discovered something that made me say I was done. I told them about meeting my cousins and how my mom kicked my dad out of the house and my sisters sided with her. My dad was just like me, or rather, I was just like him, but this time my girls are on my side. So it was this discovery that prompted you to finally stand up for yourself? Toby asked. Worry was written all over his face. No, I was taken to visit my father's grave. I hesitated at first, but I managed to lay flowers and say a few words. Then I looked at the engraving on the stone and it shocked me. That's when I realized I had to leave, I explained. What was that, Alex? They said in one voice. On the stone was a picture of a rose, and underneath it was an inscription that said, "In his memory." There was the date of his birth, and below that, the age at which he died. There was silence for a moment before I spoke again. He died at the age of 44, the age I am now. Toby and Sarah recoiled slightly at this news, and I realized they understood me. There were times when I could have reached for a drink like he did, or driven myself to suicide like my grandmother thought. I had a choice. Be like him or fight back, I said clearly. I decided that I would no longer kill myself trying to be the perfect husband to be bullied and laughed at. In that moment, I felt weaker than I had in weeks. Admitting my depression to my friends was harder than I thought it would be. Toby brought me out of it. What do you want from us, Alex? Please refuse if it's too much, but I have a plan to protect myself and get that bitch out of here. Sarah intervened. I smiled and nodded. Sarah did seem to have a tough side to her character. When I thought she was having an affair in 2008, I opened a separate savings account and put all my bonuses and all my spare cash into it. I was also lucky that the only way to get a mortgage loan for the amount we needed was to apply in my name only. Holly had no real employment history, so it was easier for me to apply a loan. And then I knew that if anyone was capable of keeping track of my train of thought, it was Toby. Right now, my savings with interest is £60,800. I'm £120,000 away from paying off my mortgage, but the house in the next street sold for over £500,000. Toby, I need you and your connections to help me get a short-term loan for the remaining £60,000. I want to pay off the mortgage before I divorce her when I divorce her. Why? That means she can have half, Sarah said. Well, barring the 60-odd thousand pounds in savings I'm keeping, she could fight for half of everything anyway. But that's where you come in, I said, pausing for a second. I want you to register a new company. What do you mean, register a new company? Toby interjected. I want to transfer ownership of my house to your new company. That means she won't be able to lay her hands on it. I've looked into it, and if I pay off the mortgage, all I have to do is go to the land registry and transfer the deeds to your company. Toby and Sarah looked at each other for a moment. Will that work, Alex? After all, if you divorce her, she'll hire a lawyer and fight for everything. She doesn't have the money for that, and I'm sure her parents won't want to pay such a huge bill if they find out their daughter is a cheating whore. Plus, I'm hoping to use her opinion of me to my advantage, I said. How? Asked Toby. She thinks I'm a coward who will never leave her. That's why I won't ask for a divorce until I sell the house. The property will turn into cash, and by the time she realizes I'm divorcing her, we can move that money into a lot of different accounts. Toby only smiled at me and said, I didn't know you were capable of that, Alex. So you're going to help me? I asked. Oh yeah, I'll look into it, but you know a good lawyer will try to trace the money, don't you? He said. Yes, but it will take a long time and she won't be able to afford a big legal bill. After another hour of conversation, I headed home. All the pieces were coming together. On the way, I decided I wasn't even going to file for divorce. I was sure I wouldn't meet anyone else, let alone remarry, and that way I would have more time. I figured Holly wouldn't be bothered by my absence for at least a month. At that thought, I laughed to myself. By next week, I'd be gone. When I got home, it was almost 2 in the morning. I looked in on Holly and she was sound asleep. No amount of remorse is keeping her from sleeping, I thought. I decided to go to the spare room. Thursday morning, I was up and out of the house before Holly even woke up. I wrote my resignation letter in the morning, and around lunchtime I called Toby. I've got good news, bad news, and then good news again, buddy. Okay, let's go in that order, I said, laughing. The good news is that I've incorporated the company. It will only take an hour at the company office, he said. The bad news is that to get a loan for the amount you need, you'll need some serious collateral, something like a house, and that won't work for you. I was frustrated and scratching my head trying to think of something when Toby continued. Listen, Alex, you trust me and I trust you. I've talked to Sarah about this and we're thinking the same thing. I'll transfer £60,000 into your account right now so you can get on with the business. Just give me the money back when you find him, okay? I was stunned. If he could see my face right now, he'd realize how grateful I was to him. That's too much, Toby. You've done enough already, I interrupted. Just take the money and go do what you need to do, he said. You have no idea how much it helps me, buddy. I owe you a huge debt of gratitude. Just do it. Walk away from this disrespectful, money-hungry crook and be happy. That's all we care about. I gave him my details and ended the call. The next call was to the bank to make an appointment for the next day. After work, or lack thereof, I drove to the local Land Rover dealership. I knew the guy because that's where I bought Holly's Range Rover Sport about 10 months ago. As a matter of fact, I was still paying for it. I had an idea on how to get some more money. Hello, Mr. Price. Have you finally decided on a new car? John Reeves met me at the entrance. He was the owner of the dealership. No, John. I wanted to discuss selling my wife's car and paying off my debt, I said, looking more pleased than I should have. I hope everything's okay? He asked. Everything's fine. You know her, and you know how demanding she is. Now she wants a Mercedes 4X4. I don't want to say anything bad, but she seemed pushy, he admitted. No. We came to an agreement that he would take the Range Rover back and we would cancel our payment plan. I promised to come back to upgrade my car, and he knew he could offset the value of Holly's car by selling it as practically new. I apologized for the inconvenience, but the thought of him selling me an expensive new Range Rover more than made up for it. On the way out, I bought a 2016 brochure, but not for myself, but for Holly. When I got home, Holly was sitting in the living room drinking coffee, looking a little pale. I took off my jacket and threw my bag on the floor. Everything okay, honey? I asked through clenched teeth. Yeah, just a little tired, honey, she replied, taking a sip from her mug. She held out her arms as if wanting me to put my arms around her and make her feel better. I ignored her and went back to my bag and pulled out a pamphlet. I know what will make you feel better, I said. I walked over to her and sat down on the coffee table across from her. She looked confused at the empty seat next to her and at me. What do you have there? She asked, looking at the brochure. Your car is almost a year old and I was at the dealership today and saw their new model. It's awesome, I said as her eyes lit up. I want my wife to have the best, so I'm going to trade in your car and get you this one, I said, pointing to the new 2017 model in the brochure. Oh, I like that, she said, ignoring my plan. You always know how to make me feel better, don't you, Alex? Said Nick. The only problem is that they already have a buyer for your car, so I need to get it there by Friday afternoon. I'll finish work early and drive it to the dealership, and you can just use my car this weekend to visit your loved ones. The last remark made her recoil, and a look of shock and confusion appeared on her face. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing, Alex. I just thought you were still mad about our arrangement, she asked. It wasn't our arrangement, Holly. It was yours. I didn't have a say in it. But I guess I don't really have a choice, do I? I said, hoping for an answer. She only nodded, as if to finally put me on hold, and I admitted defeat. I love you, Alex. I turned to look at her and was met with a sincere, concerned look. I didn't say anything in response and just walked away to the kitchen. The phone rang and I went out into the garden to take the call. Toby confirmed that the money had been transferred. I was ready to go. The next day, wasting no time, I walked into the bank and found myself in the office of a mortgage loan officer. She looked to be about my age, but she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. I wondered if there could be a life after Holly, but pushed the thought to the back of my mind. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off. All remaining accounts were closed. I went around to a few houses and opened a new account at another bank. I was happy knowing I wouldn't have to pay anything else unless Holly hired a lawyer and went to court. My smile faded. I walked back into the office, ignoring Olivia as she rose to her feet to speak. I sat down at my desk with a cup of coffee and began thinking about the next phase of my plan. I contacted the land registry and filled out the appropriate online application form. I had all the details of Toby and Sarah's new company, and within 10 minutes of submitting the application, I received a confirmation email stating that it would take 5 days to process. After that, I would simply hand the paperwork over to Toby, and he could register the property to his company. I decided to wander around the internet looking for furniture and information about canceling utilities in the house. I had to wait for the right time, but I did open new accounts for my apartment in Sutton. I finally had one more thing left to do, something I'd been putting off all along. I knocked on Jack's door. Olivia was there with him, of course. That dirty old bastard usually fiddled with her on Fridays, and I seemed to be interfering with their lovemaking. She left us alone. "What can I do for Alex?" he said cheerfully, escorting Olivia away with a look. I placed my resignation letter on his desk. He looked at me with a goofy grin on his face. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I resigned," I replied. "I think it would be best if I left right away. Given the situation with our families, I doubt you'll want me here for too long." He looked dumbfounded. "I would appreciate it if you could have my P45 ready by Monday. And please don't tell anyone about this, my wife doesn't know," I said defiantly. "But you can't do that, we need you," he said pathetically. "Not as much as you need your nephew. I'll be here on Monday to pick up the last of your things." I pretended to drop my pen from my pocket and bent over to pull a digital recorder out of my sock. I managed to attach a pin to it, and standing up, I pressed the record button and slid it under the seat into the wooden frame. If that's all Jack needs, I've got things to do. "Fine, Alex, but don't come crawling back when you run out of money. Your money is the only thing keeping that cheating wife with you. Do you realize that?" "Of course I realize that, Jack. I wish my wife was as faithful as yours," I said, smiling. I knew it hit a nerve with him. I turned and walked out of his office. An hour later, I drove home and picked up Holly's car and magazine. I stopped by the car dealership and dropped off her car. Fortunately, John Reeves offered to drive me home, and I gladly accepted. When I got home that evening, Holly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I realized she had been crying. "What's going on, Holes?" I asked with feigned sincerity. "We need to talk, Alex," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. For a moment, I felt like I was being snitched on. A sense of dread came over me. "What's going on?" I asked. "I was at the doctor's office today, and I was diagnosed with—" She hesitated. Many thoughts were swirling around in my head. If this was serious, what kind of man would I have to be to abandon a seriously ill woman like I was about to do? I have—" she stammered. "Just tell me, Holly, what is it?" I begged her to spit it out. "I have gonorrhea," she finally said, bursting into tears. I laughed. Hell, I laughed and she just stared at me. "That's not funny. I'm so embarrassed." I turned to her and she looked embarrassed. This was supposed to be humiliating. "Well, I know I don't have it because I haven't touched you in over a month. And when I found out about your adventures, I used protection," I said, trying not to gloat too much. "Oh, so you're doing okay so far, is that normal?" She continued to remain silent. "Just take your meds and soon you'll be standing on your back again. Oops, I mean on your feet." If looks could kill, I'd be dead by now. "Just find out which one of them gave you the medicine and tell them to take it to the doctors before the disease spreads any further," I said, and got up and left her crying at the table. That night I slept soundly for the first time in months. Of course, I slept in the spare room. It wasn't worth the risk with an exhausted wife. Saturday morning I felt great. A good night's sleep had definitely done me good, so I headed to our bedroom and woke Holly up in bed to tell her I was going to give her time to rest and recover. "I'm going over to the girls. I'll give them all your wishes. Get some rest, okay?" I said this with as much love as I could portray. She smiled at me and asked me to hug her. I gave in, but did so half-heartedly. When she opened her arms, she must have sensed that something was wrong with me. She looked at me sadly and said, "You think I'm disgusting, don't you?" I didn't answer anything, and suddenly tears ran down her cheeks. "I just want you to feel better, that's all." "Oh, Alex, I love you so much. I think I screwed up really badly." I told Allison about my problem and she was horrified. I felt sorry for her at first, but she disappeared even faster than I thought she would. That shocked me a little. Then I realized that I had lost all love for the woman I had been married to for 21 years. Could she really disappear so quickly? Apparently she could because I was ready for it, and her situation couldn't stop me. Without saying anything, I left the room. I got into my car and drove off happily. Later that morning, I sat with the girls and told them all that had happened. They were amazed, and I could see that they were starting to respect me again. I told them about Holly's little trip to the doctors, which they found hilarious. I shouldn't have laughed, but I couldn't help it, and it made me think that maybe the girls really did hate her as much as I did. "What is she going to do about Daddy?" Ava asked. Ava asked. "She's going to have to move in with her grandparents or convince one of her lovers to take her in. I have a feeling those two degenerates were only interested in having sex with a married woman and bragging about it. I doubt they would want to have a relationship with her. What do you think?" I asked. They both just looked at me and shook their heads. That evening, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who were hosting a dinner party attended by many of their friends and coworkers. There were several single women my age among the invitees, and I felt confident enough to strike up a conversation with them. The alcohol helped me approach one woman named Amy, who caught my eye. She was a divorced friend of Sarah's, and as the drinks flowed, she even managed to talk me into dancing. It was a fun night, and it was what I really needed. A night where I didn't think about Holly, or the end of my marriage, or my plans to leave her, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. When I returned home late Sunday morning, I found Holly doing chores around the house. I walked into the living room, and when she saw me, she rushed over to me and gave me a hug. I just patted her on the back. "Where were you staying last night, Alex? I thought you were coming home," she asked. "Toby and Sarah had a dinner party, and I had too much to drink, so I slept on their couch," I replied nonchalantly. "That's not like you. Did you have fun?" she asked, throwing me a wary look. I had to be careful not to give anything away, so I pulled out my phone and showed her some pictures. Soon her face turned red. "Who is this woman?" she asked angrily. "Oh, that's Amy. She's a friend of Sarah's. She made me dance. It was a lot of fun." I looked up from my phone and saw Holly looking at me angrily. The irony of her being mad at me didn't settle in my head. She was mad at me for innocently dancing around while she was having sex with some guy every week. "I want to go with you next time. I haven't seen guys in a while," she said, returning to her normal color. I made my way to the kitchen and put the kettle on. Holly followed me. "Did you feel okay without the car?" I tried to fill the silent air with small talk. "Fine. When is my new car coming?" she asked. "They said it would be delivered on Wednesday." I turned around and saw that she looked somewhat concerned. "But if you want to pick it up, you can come over Monday afternoon and pick it up." "I have something to do on Monday. Get my hair done and go shopping with my sister," she replied, clearly not too concerned about the missing car. "I can drop you off in town to meet your sister and then have her take you to the car dealership. And then you can come back in your new Range Rover," I said, grinning excitedly. She smiled and headed towards me with open arms. I went back to the kettle, pretending not to notice her. The rest of the day, Holly was by my side and I felt awkward. She kept trying to kiss me or hug me, and I kept making excuses to leave. Apparently, she realized what was wrong because, as I went to bed, I saw that she was crying again. "Good night, Holly. Are you going to sleep with me tonight, Alex? I want to snuggle up to you and I want you to tell me everything's going to be okay." I felt nothing. "Not until you get permission from Dr. Holly." "I'm sorry, but you made your own bed," I said stiffly. "Well, when I'm better, I'm sure I can find a man who wants to get into bed with me. I still have time to make up for lost time," she snapped bitterly. I chuckled to myself. It had taken longer than I'd expected, but here she was, the bitch, back. All regrets of Friday night faded away. For the last 21 years, I would have been ready for her shit, but this time I ignored her tears and headed for the spare room. Last night in my house, and she would be in the spare room. I was glad she'd said those words. They dispelled any doubts I might have had. I looked at the picture of her with her sisters and felt nothing but hatred for her. She was nice when she wanted something and a bitch when she couldn't have it. Monday morning, I woke up early. Holly woke up early too. She had an 8:30 appointment with her hairdresser, so I drove her into town as planned. "Don't forget to take a cab to the dealership around 2 p.m. They're waiting for you," I said, ignoring her attempts to kiss me. And I drove away knowing that this was probably the last time I would see her. Somehow I was afraid it wouldn't happen, but that was as long as I could make it. On the way out, I called the cell phone company and canceled both of our contracts. I pulled over to the side of the road to pay the fine on my card. I was informed that the phones would be open until 5 p.m. Great. I then headed to the office to pick up my P45. I walked into the factory and there was a festive atmosphere. The news of my departure must have reached everyone, and for a brief moment I saw a look of fear on their faces. I didn't know why. Walking down the hallway to my office, I passed the coffee machine where the usual suspects had gathered. I wasn't sure if Max and Henry knew they both had sex with my wife or not, but they both smirked as they looked at me and exchanged jokes with the other assholes. "Good morning, guys," I said cheerfully. "Good morning, Alex. How's the wife?" They said this to the usual laughter. How that joke is still funny is simply mind-boggling. "Not so good, I'm afraid," I replied. "One of you underdogs snatched her away." I walked away in complete silence, and when I turned around, their jaws dropped, and Max shouted something to Henry. I heard a lot of noise before I headed up the stairs. Olivia saw me coming and gave me a half smile, lowering her head. Maybe now they were starting to respect me. Jack was at the door before I could knock. "I have what you need, so take it and get out." Perhaps the respect story was a figment of my imagination. I walked into his office and sat down. I reached under the chair and discreetly put the recorder in my pocket. I knew he'd laid out his weekly story to Olivia on Friday night, and now I had it all on the recorder. "So you have another job, Alex?" he snapped back. At first, I ignored him, but then I decided I'd give him what he wanted. "No, nothing," I said. A wide smile appeared on his face. Apparently, he figured I'd come crawling back to him soon. "So I get last month's paycheck and a year-end bonus?" I asked. He burst into laughter when Olivia walked in with my P45. "What's so funny?" she asked. "Alex just asked for his bonus and salary to be given to him." "That's hilarious," Olivia said, joining in his laughter. I thought, why not, and joined in too. This made them stop and look at me like I was crazy. "Why are you laughing, Alex?" Olivia asked. "I don't know, Olivia. Why do you let that old bastard have sex with you every week?" I said, laughing louder and louder. They froze as her eyes widened and Jack started to turn red with anger. "I'm sure Mom and Dad are proud of their slutty girl." "No." She threw my papers on the floor and ran out of the room in tears. "You bastard," Jack said. "Get out of my office and out of my company before I call the guys to drag you out by your ears." I laughed, walked out of the house, and headed to my office to pack up the last of my things. I was still laughing to myself when I stopped in front of my house. I got out of the car and lowered the back seats. I opened the trunk and walked into the house. I walked around the house thinking about what I wanted to take with me. I had a few Romero Brito works, so I took them down and wrapped them in plastic I found in the garage. I packed them in the car and continued to walk around the house packing. Finally, I went upstairs and cleared out my closet. I pulled all the documents out of the safe, including the girls' birth certificates and marriage license. I found the attic stairs, went upstairs, and found all my old stuff. My diploma and family photos were there. I went to the handyman and picked up all the jewelry I had brought with me from Holly over the years. They must have cost over 10,000 pounds, and then I took all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats I'd brought with me. In fact, the whole bloody closet was bought by me, so I took everything. I've always been a responsible person, so I had insurance checks for almost all of the stuff, and that would serve me well when I came to sell it all. When I finished packing, I realized I was going to need a TV, so I took that as well, along with my movie collection and Blu-ray player, of course. By this time, my car was full. I figured I might lose all of Holly's clothes and a few other unnecessary things, including my old clothes. The new me would require a new closet, and the girls didn't fail to take the opportunity to help me with that. I found all the best pictures of me and the girls and put them in the car. I wasn't in any hurry to get anywhere because Holly wasn't going to be back until after 2 in the afternoon. I made a cup of tea and took 5 minutes to myself. You have to have a cup of tea. I think it's written in the Magna Carta. I picked up the phone, called the telco, and canceled satellite TV, phone, and internet. I called British Gas and Southern Water to cancel the utilities. It would take a few days, but I didn't care. I went back to the bedroom and sat down on the bed when I noticed something that brought to mind a thought that frightened even me. It was lying on the very top of the closet in an old, dusty box. It was Holly's wedding dress. She loved it, probably more than I did. I took it off and then found our wedding album among the boxes of photos on the bed. Grabbing the duvet cover, I gathered all my things and headed out into the garden. Once outside, I walked to the middle of the garden and put everything in a pile. I added all of Holly's clothes and her things that I knew I wouldn't be able to sell. I made sure to leave only her underwear because I didn't want it to get dirty. I went to my car and locked all the doors. I was about to drive off, but when I looked at my watch, I saw that it was only 1:45 p.m. So I called Robert Williams and told him that I could give my P45 later that evening, along with the night shift. That way I could start work tomorrow morning. He was thrilled, and I told him I was already working on plans to get new customers and improve the hydraulic pumps to make them super competitive in the marketplace. I think he sensed my enthusiasm, and as I wrapped up the conversation, I hoped I had made his day. It was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was still sitting there waiting for the call. Finding some paint thinner in the garage, I went out into the garden and poured it on my wedding dress. I was about to light the fire when the phone rang. "Hi," I said calmly. "What's going on, Alex?" shouted Holly into the receiver. "What do you mean, Holly?" I asked sarcastically. "Don't play dumb, Alex," she continued. "Calm down, Holly. What's going on?" Silence ensued, and I could hear her heavy breathing. In the background came her sister's voice. "I was told you didn't bring me a new car. You sold mine." "Oh yeah, did I forget to tell you that?" I said. "What are you talking about, Alex? What's going on?" She started to panic. "Well, from now on, if you need a car, you can pay for it yourself," I said, trying to stay as calm as possible. My heart was pounding frantically. I I don't understand, Alex," she said meekly and confused. "You heard me perfectly well, Holly. You can buy it if you want. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to clean up the kitchen." "What? What? Is this some kind of sick joke?" I was silent. "We'll talk about it when I get home, Alex." "I'm not okay with being patronized," she shouted. I fell silent again. I heard her panting, running to her sister's car. The slam of the door confirmed it. I knew she was on her way. In this condition, she could convince her sister to be here in 5 minutes. "Alex, Alex, Alex." "Yes," I replied almost too calmly. "You said you were in our kitchen?" she asked, suddenly realizing what I had said. "Yes." "And why aren't you at work?" she asked. I continued to remain silent. "Alex, Alex, Alex." Her breath caught, and I could hear the panic and confusion in her voice. I hung up the phone as she continued to scream my name. I went outside, struck a match, and lit the fire. Our past flared up as I walked away. I pulled the marriage certificate out of my pocket, ripped it to shreds, and left it on the kitchen table along with the only picture of us all vacationing at Disneyland. It was a wonderful time with many happy memories. I wonder if she thought the same. I got in the car and drove off. When I reached the end of the street, I saw Holly and Jennifer pull up to the house in the rearview mirror. Neither of them looked up, they just ran into the house. I turned my phone off, smiled, and pulled away. The A3 was practically empty as I drove to my new home. For some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that gripped me. I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see Holly, and once my plan came to fruition, she'd do anything to track me down and make me pay. That was the kind of person she was. I also knew she would get the girls involved, and I didn't want them to be burdened with our problems, especially since they needed to focus on their studies. I was in Sutton by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and figured I had time to stop by the local phone store and get a new cell phone contract. I also had time to catch the receptionists at work processing my P45 and meet Freya, my new receptionist. She was quite young but kept very professional, a complete contrast to Olivia. I went back to my new apartment, which was completely empty. There was water and electricity, so I found the kettle I'd brought with me from home and made a cup of tea. I moved my stuff in and ordered a pizza. I picked up my old cell phone and turned it on. The connection was broken. I smiled to myself, knowing that Holly was now without her phone too, and that should give the girls some respite before I could talk to them. I found my sleeping bag and spread it out in the living room and waited for dinner. I was supposed to have furniture delivered over the weekend, but for now, I was glad to at least be away from Holly. I turned on my laptop and found the voice recordings I'd made in Jack Walker's office. I downloaded their contents and listened to hear incriminating evidence of his infidelity to Olivia. I took 2 thumb drives and made multiple copies. I wrote the addresses of Margaret Walker, Jack's wife, and Peter Lewis, Olivia's boyfriend, and then inserted a thumb drive into each of them. I'll send them off tomorrow before work. Finally, I decided to call my daughter Sophie to give her the latest news and to keep their mother from finding out where I was. To my surprise, she admitted that she hadn't even talked to her mother yet. But of course, my guess is that she didn't have a phone to do so. Within a week, I had managed to furnish my apartment and, with no time to waste on work, I contacted Walker Engineering's clients and persuaded them to move to Sutton. They saw what we had to offer and very quickly jumped on our ship. A few decided to stay with Jack, but most hated him, but tolerated him because of the excellent products we offered. I knew Jack wouldn't immediately understand why his business was losing customers, but I didn't care. I also knew that now that my old house had all the utilities shut off, Holly would realize I wasn't coming back. There was no way she could afford to pay the bills, so I knew Toby could safely begin the selling process. Sarah happily took on the task, and by the end of the week, signs were up on the house. It was at this time that I was contacted by Ava. Apparently, Holly had moved into her parents' house and they were not happy that their little princess had gone rogue. Holly, of course, was out for my blood and was furious at what I had done to her. Strangely, I found great satisfaction in it, but I knew it wasn't over yet. So over the weekend, I was invited to another dinner party at Toby and Sarah's house. I was told that Amy would be there and that she had been asking Sarah about me. I learned that she had gotten divorced a few years ago and had been single since her husband left her a year before the divorce. Apparently, the divorce went well. She got the house and full custody of the children, as well as financial support. Unfortunately, she has been skeptical of men ever since. Sarah told her about my situation, and she's wanted to meet me ever since. That's why they planned this dinner party. She was 2 years younger than me and had 2 older teenage children. I felt like I was being set up, but decided it couldn't hurt. Dinner was a success, and I felt completely at ease for the first time since I'd thought about running away from Holly. Amy understood what I was going through, didn't pressure me or let me know that she liked me. We got drunk, danced together, and exchanged numbers at the end of the night. She told me to call if I needed someone to talk to, and I thanked her. I slept in the spare room at Toby's house, but it was getting harder and harder to fight the hangover and the coffee wasn't helping. Sunday morning brought good news. Just a week after I put the house on the market, I received 2 serious offers. One of them I immediately accepted for £550,000. I knew it could be some time before the deal was finalized, but agreed to get the money as soon as it was ready. I would open an ISA in the girls' names and then ask Toby to spread the remaining amount between numerous investment funds. I would also return the money to him and take some of it in cash to keep in a home safe. I still felt the need to protect myself. Another week passed and I was happy to hear from Toby that the sale could go through very quickly. I contacted the moving company and told them to vacate my old house. The girls called their mother and asked if she needed anything, and she became even more angry and threatening. I promised the girls that it would be over soon. Tuesday morning, I spoke with one of our new customers who was meeting with Jack Walker about a possible renewal of a supply contract. He told Jack that he was moving to Sutton Engineering, and Jack wasn't surprised. He learned that Walker Engineering had to cut 50% of their staff due to job losses. He also informed me that Mrs. Walker was divorcing Jack due to adultery. I had absolutely no sympathy as I was mentally counting commission checks during our conversation. I had no idea what had happened to Olivia and her boyfriend, but I knew he would get my gift if Mrs. Walker got hers. And if she didn't, I was sure she was well aware of the reasons for Mrs. Walker's divorce from her husband. I wonder what her friends and family would think about her cheating with an old man. As a reward for my new job, I was given a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSE. I was already thinking of treating myself, but Robert and the bosses were so pleased with me and how the company was progressing that they gave me the car and a few thousand in commission. In fact, it was over £30,000. I was looking out of my office window admiring my new car when a familiar Ford Focus pulled into the parking lot. I froze as I realized who it belonged to. It was Diane's car, Holly's mom. I leaned back in my chair and waited for the inevitable call. The bitch had finally found me. The phone rang in my office and I picked it up. "Mr. Price, there's a woman sitting in the waiting room claiming to be your wife," said Freya, my secretary. Tell her I have a meeting and I'll be down in an hour." 3 hours later, I looked out the window and she was still sitting there. I exhaled noisily and decided to leave for the night. If she saw me, I'd have to deal with it, and if she didn't, I'd just drive past. It wasn't like she knew which car to pay attention to. I walked out the side door and headed to my car. I was just getting into my car when I heard the squeal of tires, and before I knew it, she had stopped and was blocking my way. She jumped out of the car and rushed toward me with a face like thunder. She looked like hell. Her clothes were clearly her sister's old clothes, and her hair looked like it hadn't been brushed in weeks. "You bastard!" she screamed, throwing a slap in my direction but missed. "I hate you. I hate you." "Yeah, I hate you too, Holly. Now say what you have to say and then get out of my life," I said, trying to stay calm. She just looked at me with tears rolling down her cheeks. "You ruined my life, you bastard," she whispered pitifully. I didn't say anything back, I just kept listening. "You destroyed all my belongings, my wedding dress and clothes." It had been all about her so far, and I wasn't surprised. "And then you reversed your decision and made me move in with Mom and Dad," she continued. She just looked at me and waited for me to speak. "Is that all, Holly?" I asked. "Don't you have anything to say for yourself?" she exclaimed. I thought for a second before inviting her into the car. She was taken aback, but I didn't want to be a public spectacle anymore. As we sat down, I saw how bad she looked. She seemed to have aged, and I wondered if all this plus the STD had affected her appearance. "Please come home, Alex. We can put all this behind us. I forgive you." What did she just say? Are my ears deceiving me? "You forgive me?" I asked, hoping I had misheard. "Yes, Alex, I forgive you for ruining my things and my life." "Are you delusional, Holly?" I asked. She just looked at me like I was crazy. "You openly cheat on me and disrespect me when I give you everything, and you have the nerve to say you forgive me." But, but I thought, "No, Holly, you're only thinking of yourself. I'll never be with you again, so go away and be with one of your lovers," I said coldly. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and I understood. "I suppose when you suddenly became single they didn't want you?" I asked. "They accused me of giving them an STD and said I was just having a little fun. They said they would never want to have me as a girlfriend because I'm a cheating bitch." For a second I even thought that was cruel, but she had already made the bed. "Well, that was obvious, Holly. So look for someone else. My girlfriends have started treating me differently. Now we've broken up and their husbands have started questioning their fidelity, which means I've been kicked to the curb. I can be a bad influence if you can believe it." The word breakup was not out of my head. I knew it meant I was still connected to her, and that made me sad. My parents are disgusted, and everyone in town has heard about my venereal disease, no doubt thanks to my so-called friends and lovers. And now, some of the factory workers have also lost their jobs, and that's my fault too. The truth was that she herself was partly to blame for everything that had happened to her. But I felt sympathy for her. She had messed up and was paying the price, but how great that price was. She had a beautiful life and she had ruined it because of greed and disrespect. However, I knew I had to move on with my life. "I have nothing left, Alex. I need you, and I want you back in my life. I have no money and no job. When will I get my share of the house?" There it was. "You've never once told me you love me. You just need me, Holly, and I don't need you." As for the house, I didn't pay my mortgage and lost it, I lied. Her eyes widened and her jaw dropped. She was shocked by my words, but at least I knew how this visit would turn out. "I want a divorce," I said. "No, please, Alex, of course I love you. Over 20 years together and I made a small mistake and you're burning me out. A very big, unforgivable mistake, Holly, and I'm never coming home to you." "Please, Alex," she screamed, and her cries echoed throughout the car. "I need a clean break, and if you agree, I'll give you £30,000 in cash," I offered. I saw her face change, and the tears were replaced by a new determination. "No," she screamed, "I will fight you in court for everything. There's no way you'll lose the house, you're too smart for that." Damn it, she was right, and now I'm standing on her hind legs. "Okay, Holly, I'll say this," I began. "You're never going to get a penny from me." She moved her hips and pitched forward toward me. "I'll fight you for anything and more, Alex. You have no money, Holly, and I'll transfer my assets so much that you'll spend a fortune trying to find money. I'm smart, so by the time your lawyer finds it, you'll have run up a bill that will wipe out all the benefits. I suggest you take the money I'm offering or I'll give it up too." "It's up to you," I said sternly, keeping my eyes on her. "You bastard! I loved you and bore you children, and this is how you treat me?" she said angrily. "Because of me, our girls will go far. They won't be liars and cheats. They will be selfless, not selfish like their mother. So take the money and get out of my life. My anger started to come out, and she looked at me like I was a stranger. Fine, she hissed. I'll take the money and agree to the divorce. Okay, I'll set it up. With those words, she got out of my car and slammed the door shut. A few seconds later, she drove out of the parking lot. The next day, I filed for divorce on grounds of adultery, and a week later, I arranged to meet Holly at the girl's apartment. The sale of my house went through, but I didn't want to put any money into it until the papers were signed. We tried to be polite in front of the girls, but it wasn't easy. I handed Holly the money, and she signed the papers. I kissed the girls goodbye and wished Holly good luck. As I was about to leave, she burst into tears again, but I had a feeling it was only for the girls' benefit. Sophie and Ava looked at me and raised their eyebrows. They knew. "See you next weekend, Daddy," Ava said as I headed for the door. I walked back into the room. Holly was still sobbing, and no one was paying attention to her. I suddenly realized what Ava was talking about. "Oh yeah, the Coldplay concert. Everyone's looking forward to it. Are we meeting you in London or are we going together?" Sophie asked. "I'll talk to Amy and let you know within the week," I said, one last time before leaving. On my way out the door, I heard Holly yelling something, but I chose to ignore it and left. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.